Welcome everybody for this session, and I hope you're enjoying this conference. I know I am, right? I'm learning a lot with everybody and all the sessions that has been presented so far. So I'm going to try my best to actually provide something useful here as well. So my name is Ricardo Ferreira, and I'm a developer advocate in this company called Elastic. And in this session, I'm going to try to actually show some tips that I've kind of learned the hard way about how to give live presentations when your content is about code, only code, no slides. And so the main reason I think this is important is because I would guess that every developer advocate or developer relations professional would like to create presentations or talks that are memorable, right? So I think the whole point of you going to a stage, either if it's in person or virtual, is to create your mark in the community and actually be able to contribute and educate developers about the whatever product, service, or technology you were talking about, right? So if your whole goal is to create a memorable talk, I think it is important for you to be prepared to when you don't have those slides for it. So it is funny because my whole experience with this whole live code thing happened because I was often kind of being accepted at conferences, which is good. But then the day before the actual my talk, I would end up with, all right, I have no slides yet. I know I have the code. I have a demo ready, but I have no slides. So you know what? I'm going to jump straight to the demo and just present that. And by doing so, that's how I kind of create this habit of doing live code walkthrough. And another thing that I've kind of learned throughout this pandemic is that if you start doing live coding, using code as your whole content, actually, I think that's can be a really positive outcome because one of the things that I've noticed is that people are getting tired of 100% full slides, right? So with that said, I am not saying that doing slides is wrong, right? Everybody has their own style. But what I'm saying is that if you try to mix and match a little bit of code, a little bit of lines, or maybe only code, the chances that people are going to enjoy it are going to be greater, especially during the pandemic when everything is virtual, right? It might be different if you were presenting in person, right? So, so with that said, the content that I'm going to share here today is going to be based on, I'm going to share some tips about behavioral that you should pay attention when you are presenting a code walkthrough. We're going to also obviously, right, walk you through in the mistakes or perhaps sharing some tips that you could use to make your talk memorable, right? And lastly, right, how can you actually when you present, right, if you're a teacher or a presenter, it is all about keeping the attention span throughout the end of your presentation, right? So there are studies that shows that all right, the attention span are going to vary and sometimes it's going to drop. This is normal, right? Nobody actually going to pay 100% attention to your talk, but how can you at least keep it that on average and never drop it all the time? So I'm going to share tips about this. Again, considering that you are using code as your main content, right? So the first thing I would like to share with you is that make the effort to make the presentation not about you, but about the audience, right? I've seen, and I am viewed as charged as well, right? I've seen some presenters, including myself, that in the past would use the situation about presenting as a way to show that how smart they are or how smart I was, right? This is a mistake, right? So what you have to do, use your personality. Try to be as much human being as possible and make sure that the people are going to like of your personality, not because you were good at what you're doing, but because you were truthfully trying to teach something the best way possible. So that's one of the tips that I can share that are going to help you to create your talks more memorable, right? Another thing, try to enjoy what you're doing. So one of these things that, again, I've done this mistake as well. So, and I've seen other people actually doing it, is not expressing some positive emotions while we are doing the walkthrough and the code. Like it is, especially when you're virtual, it is very tempting to you to keep looking to the screen and like treat the audience as just someone that watching your screen and you're hearing your voice and you don't necessarily are actually talking to them directly. So my advice is to try to express some emotions, right? Remember, it's all about being memorable. So For example, even if you are writing a code for the first time that is supposed to maybe invert to 3 and it works, celebrate that, like, and make sure that the people see you as enthusiasm. So that's how you are going to keep the attention span until the end, right? So, or at least try to do this, right? Uh, Make pauses. It is very important. It is very important to do pauses on any presentation, I would say, right? But when you are doing some code walkthrough, what I do is, for example, if my talk is supposed to be like 25 minutes, right? I am going to create at least 3 milestones of pauses that I will manage, right? So maybe after the first 5 minutes, I have explained the basics of what I'm trying to say, and then I'm going to literally pause, ask people if they have questions, and give the time to them to digest the code, because again, they're using code, right? Slides are easy to digest, but code sometimes is not so easy. So, and maybe people are trying to make questions, right? So yeah, sometimes you have the Q&A always in the end, but this alone is another tip that I can give it to you. Try to avoid this whole, oh yeah, Q&A on the end and let me do my thing. Make the presentation more conversational and interactive, right? I think that's going to make the attention more, not to drop, right? And very importantly, always create your code that you are going to present, and make sure that in the beginning, not in the middle or the end, in the beginning of the presentation, you say, hey, we're going to be working with this repository that is publicly available. Here's the GitHub link or whatever other repository you were using, right? Because instinctively, people will not make that effort to try to remember everything that you were talking or coding or showing, because they know, okay, if I miss a thing or two, I can go back to the repository and um, remind that there. So that will make them relax right off the bat and keep your eye focused on what you actually want to try to express. So, but again, create a repository. This is not something that, yeah, it would be nice, but it's kind of a mandatory, right? Um, Build your codes as a narrative. So, for example, you as a presenter or as a developer advocate, you always break down your content into a narrative, in a cohesive narrative, right? You're going to do this instinctively, right? Because you want to make sure that people are going to digest everything that you were saying. But this also applies when you are using code, right? So what I do usually is, let's say I am like, I actually did this presentation like a couple months ago about how to, people that write Go developers can use Elasticsearch for their applications, right? So what I've created this like a representation of the whole code and broke down into different files and modules and packages, right? So, and then as I progress it through the presentation, I walk it through each one of them individually. This is good for 2 reasons. First, because mentally it will make more sense, right? It's easy to digest instead of one whole main code that has everything there and you're just walking through top to the bottom. And secondly, because there's a question of time, right? You have to manage your time. So for example, sometimes I've been given about 15 minutes of my whole presentation and things happen, right? For example, we might be running behind schedule for the whole conference or live stream or talk that you were supposed to present. And maybe instead of actually using the 15 minutes, you have to rely on 12 or 10, right? So if you break down your logic, your content in different modules, you're going to be able to at least finish them individually and never leave the presentation with something incomplete. I think that's important, right? Another important thing is, and this is something that I've started using very recently, and I saw that it worked. So that's why I turned into a tip. Try to create 2 branches, right? The main branch, of course, right? That's where the main branch is going to contain all your code that people are going to clone and start using it, and they're going to base their work based on the main code. But one of the things that I like to do is to create what I call a demo branch or a live stream branch. And I brought you here an example of this branch. I'm going to actually open real quick here. So for example, this is a project that I've made available in my GitHub repository. And this is, as you can see here, this is the main branch, right? So this is where it's supposed the whole code is complete. So what I do, I create this branch, which I call live stream, that has nothing, right? So, and during my code walkthrough, I always start with this branch, and then I kind of have a second monitor, or maybe some iPad if you're doing a live, right, with the actual branch that contains the code. And instead of trying to remember from the top of your head what you have to write the code, you simply copy. Just like that. Remember, you don't have to prove that how good you are technically. What you have to actually teach what your code is trying to do, right? So there's no problem of, all right, I'm going to progressively trying to copy and paste all the code from the main branch to this incomplete branch, right? So the experience of digesting what the code does is going to be better, right? So this is one of the things that you should start doing it. Always create branch, and more importantly, if people can actually run a git diff to see the differences between the incomplete branch with the complete branch. So that's a bonus, right? And mistakes are fine. I mean, I cannot exhaust this like enough to say that there is okay if you were trying to run something and okay, you were supposed to happen something and didn't happen, or maybe you were starting up a service here and dragging itself, waiting for something else, and you have no idea about what's going on. It is okay to actually make these live mistakes. And I actually have the habit of intentionally create some mistakes, right? To make things more like we are all human beings, right? To be really honest with you, I am as a developer, when I see a presentation, when everything runs perfectly or smoothly, I start to think, okay, this dude is trying to trick me, because in the real life, there's not everything is perfect when it comes to code. So embrace the failures, right? Also, this is very important, right? Try to ease up in the whole programming language details. For example, I was once presenting this meetup that I was presenting about Go, and then I had this piece of code that I actually put a screenshot here that basically reads a file. It is simple like this, right? But I've noticed that after meetup, people came after me and said, Ricardo, I didn't understood completely about how the code was supposed to read that file. And then when I started looking to the actual code, I remember that, okay, I'm trying to create so many complications about concurrency and making sure that I was using the Go routines from Go to make sure that everything was going to run parallel. So the TLDR is that there are some constructs from the programming language that not everybody will kind of understand right off the bat. This is even more important if you are a person just like me. For example, I have to interact with different communities, right? Although I am a Go and a Java developer, but sometimes I have to present for some Python communities or maybe C++ community. I'm not going to expect them to understand every single building block from my programming language just because, like, I don't have to do the struggle to present to them. So make sure you don't overuse your programming language features. And the same goes to IDEs. Like I'm extremely open-minded regarding IDEs. I'm not a huge defender of one or two or three, but keep in mind that when you are presenting, remember, your job is to make sure that people understand the code. And if you present your code in such a way that depends of a given understanding about how an IDE works, whatever the IDE is, I think that people will get more confused than actually simulate your content. And and sometimes if they don't like the IDE that you are trying to use, sometimes it's going to even create the opposite effect, which is they're going to start leaving your presentation because this guy is trying to push me this IDE that I don't like it. So try to ease up in the IDEs as well, right? As much as possible, try to use VI, for example, which is everybody likes it. I take that back. Nobody likes the VI. So, I mean, some do, but I don't. That's okay. And keep the tech list to the minimum, right? This is something that I've seen a lot of people doing it. I did in the past as well. This is a classic mistake about trying to bring as many technologies because all the architectures these days are distributed, right? So In the past I've did some presentations like, all right, yeah, I'm going to use here serverless, Docker, Kubernetes on top of Terraform, and everything's going to be deployed using Ansible, and I'm going to mix and match different programming languages. Try to make it simple, right? It's just the analogy like when you go to this churrascaria experience, which is steakhouse from Brazil, and then if you don't know the concept of a churrasco, you're going to end up there and, man, I just came here to have a dinner. I don't understand why you were showing me all this type of meats and like a type of food. So, make sure that your understanding is digestible. So be coherent with the number of technology that you are trying to showcase. If you're trying to showcase more than you should, maybe break it down in different meetups and explain the non-obvious details. Like I've seen some presentations that people would start to say, yeah, just grab this manifest here and then apply your Kubernetes cluster and everything will be deployed automatically. So sometimes the manifest is doing more than actually it should. So try to spend some time explaining the plumbing behind that huge manifest that does a lot of moving parts, right? And then finally, just to wrap up, and always end your presentations to not trying to do some call to action. I'm not saying that this is wrong, right? If you do, that's okay. But one thing that I've learned in my years with developer relations that developers cannot be fooled, right? So they're going to notice if by the end of the presentation you are asking them to subscribe to your service or maybe to buy a subscription, and make all about education and awareness. If you liked your job and if you did your job right, and that's a big if, right? They're going to proactively come back to you and say, hey, Ricardo, could you help me to actually subscribe to your service because I like what I have seen from you. So with that said, I would like to thank you for your participation. I hope you enjoyed.